Bucks County. We are sponsoring this educational forum in conjunction with the Pennsylvania State League and operating under a grant that has been given to the Pennsylvania State League and our county in connection with 4 other counties from the Department of Transportation, of which there's information in the program about the grant. This is given by the Department of Transportation because they have overall federal oversight of all energy transmission pipelines. Now, I think we all experienced over the last hurricane or superstorm, as we call it, Sandy, and also the last ice storm, how dependent we are on energy. But we in the league, and I'm sure everyone in this room, is all concerned that our energy is both developed and transported safely. So the program tonight is about safety in the transportation of our energy resources. There's a lot of handouts and things that you saw on the way in. There are some resource guides out there that are samples of information that can be downloaded from various, from the lead studies and from information that we have gathered. We will be placing those in the next few weeks in the Bucks County libraries for resource materials for everyone to use. In the program, we note that we can also provide shorter programs and children's programs on this subject if anyone is interested. I want to introduce a couple of people who are our resource persons here tonight. Joanne Skinner. Joanne Skinner is with the Pennsylvania League, and she is the resource person for this program. She's gathered our experts and our materials, and she's helping us organize these meetings. So I thank her very much for being here and helping us with this. We also have Nicole Levine. She's there, and she is not a speaker tonight, but she is a resource from, she's the Director of Regional Operations and Gas Distributions for PECO. So she is an expert and someone who will be helpful and able to answer some questions as we get to that part of the meeting. Also, Representative Paul Clymer has joined us, and he's there. Thank you very much for coming. So we welcome you all. I think you'll find you're going to have a lot of good, interesting information, a lot to cover, a lot to learn. And I'm going to turn the meeting over to Joanne Conley. Joanne is a member of our Bucks County League, and she's going to moderate the program, and she is going to introduce the speakers and hearing us more. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for coming out on what we hope is the beginning of a glorious springtime that I think we all deserve. This session is intended as an information session, an education session. It's a time for the community to come together and to better understand the pipelines that crisscross underneath everywhere, and to get a sense of the safety issues involved, and just to understand better how our energy is transmitted. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy what we hope and know will be a very entertaining evening in spring. Our first speaker this evening is Dr. Roberta Winters. And Dr. Winters, in her voluntary role with the League, has worked to help educate the citizens of Pennsylvania and the League of Women Voter members in neighboring states regarding the evolving opportunities and challenges of natural gas extraction, production, and transmission. She was instrumental in the national adoption of the League of Women Voters 2010 resolution in support of safe drilling and mining for energy resources. In 2006, Roberta retired, and I put that in quotes because I would hardly say that she retired. She simply stepped aside from her elementary school teaching position in in the Radnor Township School District. She brings to us a BS in biology from Bucknell University. She has a master's in science education from Harvard and a PhD in educational leadership from the University of Pennsylvania. Our league has been blessed by Roberta's presence, and you will be blessed by her presentation. Thank you. Welcome, Roberta.
Thank you so much. I just want to tell people I was taller and I didn't have any gray hair before I got involved in the league. But that's the price you pay for becoming informed. I'm sure each of you is familiar with Ben Franklin's adage about an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of cure. Well, this is most true of pipeline safety and planning. The League would also like to note our gratitude for the U.S. Department of Transportation, who helped fund our efforts. Here's a map provided by Penn State's Marcellus Center for Outreach and Research of the major interstate gas transmission lines and storage areas in Pennsylvania. You can see they crisscross most every county, including Bucks. Pipelines are the safest way to transport hazardous liquids and gases. Here you see, let me go back. Here you see some of the interstate lines in Bucks County. The blue lines represent those for natural gas, and the red ones for liquid products. You see they generally run east to west, because gas can flow in either direction. These are some of the planned pipelines, and that little policeman on the slide is there to alert you that these are some items which you may want to spend your attention in reviewing. Planned pipelines is one of them. Based on the increase in natural gas production, there are more transmission pipelines on the way. This is the best way to get the gas to the customer. Many of these new and expanded lines will be routed through our communities. For example, here in Bucks County, the MapCorp wants to build a 5.6 miles of pipeline in Bucks County as part of a system that runs from Lambertville, New Jersey to Mississippi. It will be used by Chevron and EQT to send Marcellus gas to New York, Ohio, and the Gulf Coast. There's also an East Side expansion project of the Columbia Pipeline in process that's upgrading facilities in this county as part of their efforts to transport natural gas from Pennsylvania to customers around the world. There are also a lot of shorter lines that run from natural gas lines to other facilities. We don't have a map of all the natural gas lines, but we know there are well over 2,500 miles of them currently in the Commonwealth. In this map, showing the lines in Bradford County, we see nearly 600 miles that have been completed, with more than 300 more miles planned. Most counties with shale development are developing a similar infrastructure. In rural areas, these do not fall under state or federal jurisdiction. Thus, they are unregulated by government agencies for safety. There is no outside oversight of the construction process. And for your information, if you're out in the woods, you may want to be aware that there will be no smell if there is a leak. There are also, part of the natural gas operation, are pipelines that bring water to the site and can also be used for flowback fluids. Sometimes pipes are used to transport wastewater into pits or tanks for later disposal or reuse to frack other wells and other parts of the pad as needed. These temporary lines, often made of plastic, can be in place for a year or more. They are also unregulated and could pose potential risks to land and water if leaks occur. Now, think about a three-legged stool. It makes a very sturdy seat, but only if all the legs of the stool are of equal length. Pipeline planning and safety are all supported by three legs: industry, government agencies that permit, regulate, monitor, and enforce, and the public. That's you and me. Currently, many believe that this foundation is skewed because of the industry's significant influence and reduction in government resources and regulations. We believe that it is our job as members of the public to bring these three legs into balance. Thus, our program today, designed to educate you about pipeline planning and safety, is just the first step. For most of us, pipelines are out of sight and out of mind. We don't have the time, energy, or interest to wrap our hands or our minds around them. However, knowledge is power. So, we're going to begin by learning a bit about the system. Pipelines, again, are the safest way to transport hazardous liquids and gases. However, not all pipelines are created equal. They vary in size, purpose, and content. They also operate under different rules. As you can see from this overview of the natural gas system, the transmission of natural gas generally begins at the wellhead, moves through a series of processing facilities to make it ready for use, through compressor stations that regulate pressure, through a city gate where it is odorized, and finally into our homes and businesses. So we're going to take a speedy tour now so that you can see some of the components of the pipeline system. Here's an unconventional well pad where drilling from gas, such as from the Marcellus Shale, may occur in our Commonwealth. Once the drilling is complete, most of the equipment and trailers disappear. This is a rural area of Pennsylvania where gathering lines are being built to carry gas from the wellhead to other processing plants or transmission lines. Sometimes these pipelines can be as big and as operate under pressures as high as interstate transmission lines. Here is a processing facility that may be used to separate various gases and impurities from the methane that we use in our homes. Many of these other gases have commercial value, such as in manufacturing plastics. These are compressor stations. These are large buildings holding huge engines and other equipment that regulate pressure and remove impurities to keep the gas moving safely and efficiently. They run 24/7, sometimes operate with a lot of noise and can also be a source of air pollution. Because the demand, here are the large interstate transmission lines. They carry the natural gas from one state to another. They can be large and operate, again, under high pressures as high as 1,800 pounds per square inch. Because the demand for natural gas varies with the weather, it can be stored in above-ground tanks like this facility in Florida, or in underground caverns such as abandoned salt mines or even gas wells. Pennsylvania has 60 underground storage fields in 25 counties. Control centers, or SCADA, which is an acronym for Supervisory, Control, and Data Acquisition Facilities, monitor natural gas flow in pipelines. They can note if major leaks occur, and in many cases act to remotely shut off valves to stop flow to prevent major disasters. The city gate is where pressure is reduced so that the gas can flow without problems from the larger transmission lines to the smaller distribution lines that run underground to our homes. This is where mercaptan or that rotten egg or skunk smell is added for safety reasons to give methane that foul odor that warns you of a leak. Here you can see distribution lines being replaced. In this case, it was cast iron with plastic. This is an important part of maintaining pipeline integrity. Distribution lines can be several inches in diameter to those that are about the size of your little finger and run into many homes that use natural gas appliances. Gas customers pay an extra fee on their gas bills each month to help pay for these infrastructure replacements. Now here is a visual representation taken by a device that measures natural gas or methane leaks that contribute, and these leaks contribute to climate change. In this case, it shows Boston, where an old infrastructure is in need of repair. To protect the public, emergency responders need to be prepared, and residents need to know and understand what to do in the case they do smell gas. Company plans show that safety and repair records are required to be on file with all the government agencies. However, in Pennsylvania, they are not available to the public, even under the right to know law. As some of you may know, methane is more than 20 times more effective in trapping heat than carbon dioxide. So you know the League's mission is to encourage informed participation that guides policy decisions. We hope that when our speakers will share with you will make a difference. And I want to thank you again, as our previous introducer, for your attendance and attention.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Beth Alman. And Beth is a senior right-of-way specialist with Buckeye Partners based outside of Allentown, Pennsylvania. She serves as a field agent for Buckeye's facilities in southeastern Pennsylvania. She acts as property manager for Buckeye-owned properties across the United States, and she manages the review of all third-party utility crossings and development projects near Buckeye's pipelines. Beth has a Bachelor of Science in Physical Geography from Penn State and a law degree from Drexel University School of Law. So please welcome Beth. We are sure she will bring to us a lot of good information and explain to us who Buckeye is.
And thank you all for being here. It's a wonderful opportunity to have face-to-face time with the residents in a community where Buckeye has pipelines and operates. We'll get into some of those locations here in a minute. So an initial comment on Buckeye is as a slight transition from what we were just discussing, which is primarily natural gas. Buckeye is a petroleum pipeline operator. We handle liquid products. So I'll get to it in a little bit, but gasoline, kerosene, diesel, jet fuel, that type of thing. So it's a little different. A lot of what you were seeing in terms of the gathering systems is different than the way our system works. My objectives tonight are to give you an overview of our operations in general, as well as specifically in this area, to give you an overview of pipeline safety and the inspection procedures that are part of our process, review how the pipelines are marked, how to detect a possible leak, what to do in case of a leak, and also a brief overview of our outreach efforts to connect with the public and other community groups to share information similar to tonight's event. So Buckeye primarily provides petroleum products, transportation services in the Northeast and upper Midwest states, although our footprint has been expanding in the last maybe 5 years. Here's a footprint. We are a common carrier pipeline, which means that basically our company serves refiners, wholesalers, marketers, airlines, railroads, and any other end user of product that is not a consumer. You know, Buckeye, you don't go to a Buckeye gas station and fill up your tank. You've never seen one. Some of our counterparts in our industry, Sunoco, also have a retail side. We don't. We are just middle market and serve the transmission lines for liquid products. This gives you a sort of general overview of where we're at. The bulk of our system is that northeast corridor. We have about 6,000 miles of pipeline, primarily in the northeast, that Buckeye owns and operates ourselves, and we have another 3,000 miles scattered through that footprint. A lot of what we have in Texas are owned by other folks, but we operate them. And through those, we transport about 55 million gallons of liquid products every day of the year, 24/7. In Bucks County, you can see we cross the northern part of the county. We are the red line. That is actually two pipelines that run parallel to each other between Macungie and Linden, New Jersey. about 15 miles in Bucks County. The two pipelines that run through are 16 inches and 20 inches in diameter. They were constructed, one in the 1950s and one in the 1970s. They're still running, so these are things that have longevity if they're operated, maintained, inspected properly. And just, it's Springfield, Mount Mixon, and Tinicum townships that we're in. These don't show up very well at all, unfortunately. And I don't know the area well enough to tell you exactly what that would look like if I had better information. But we are here. I might just skip through this part a little bit. Those of you who are near us or have questions, feel free to talk to me afterwards and I can get you a little better intro. But basically, we do in Mount Mixon run right behind Palisades Middle School. So behind the school from the road you came in on. And one other resource that I want to point out to you that is a resource for pipelines in your communities is the National Pipeline Mapping System. It is a website that is part of the Department of Transportation. It has resources that allow you to get shapefiles and other maps showing pipelines in your community. They don't go to a scale that you can see your house, but they will have roads and enough information for you to have an idea of what might be in your neighborhood. This is just what that website looks like, and they have some other resources on there as well. But a disclaimer, those maps are never to be used to rely upon for any kind of construction. Always place one call before you do any kind of excavation. We have someone that will discuss that in more detail a little later. A little bit about Buckeye's transportation system. As I mentioned, we are not affiliated with any major oil company. We don't own the products we transport. We are a middleman. Kind of like FedEx or UPS, we just ship it. It's not our product. We are under contract with many parties to send these products around the country. Pipelines operate year-round, every day of the week, unless we're in the middle of maintenance functions. As I mentioned earlier, gasoline, jet fuel, diesel fuel, heating oil, and kerosene are our primary products, gasoline being the majority of that. And we, as I mentioned before, we don't ship natural gas, which means if in any case of emergency you smell that rotten egg odor that Roberta mentioned, it is not us. Just be aware, it's, if our product is in the vicinity, it's going to smell like gasoline. There will be some type of odor associated with that, just like when you're at the gas station and that type of thing. Information about how the products run through the pipelines. On any given day, there will be lots of things in a pipeline at one time. We batch products behind each other. So we have a customer, a state away that needs gasoline. That may be in the volume that we need to ship today. At the end of the gasoline, diesel fuel comes right behind it. These are pressurized lines. It pretty much stays in the order you put it in the pipeline until it gets to the other end. There's a little bit in the middle where it mixes. We take that out, and some of it can be downgraded to a lower type of fuel that one of our customers can use, and the rest of it gets processed back to a refinery and turned into new product again. But so, from an emergency standpoint, that's something that we always have to be tuned into, that if there is a leak, it's possible that it could be one of several products, and our operator will always be able to identify what it was at any given location, but emergency officials are also tuned into this because different products have different flashpoints and that type of thing that you need to be aware of in terms of responding to any kind of potential incident. We touched on this quickly earlier. Control centers are where the pipelines are monitored. Ours is in Brymantsville, which is right outside of Allentown. We have operators there around the clock watching SCADA systems for volume, temperature, pressure, many indicators on all of our pipelines. These people are well trained to know what types of anomalies in that monitoring indicate the possibility of a problem. And especially at Buckeye, every single one of those people is trained from the first minute they walk in the door that it is 100% their right, obligation, duty to, if there's anything that looks remotely questionable, they're not comfortable with, you shut down. And that is drilled into the culture of Buckeye, which, as someone who's not in that position to have to make the call, I still am really appreciative of as someone who works for the company. There is no question that if there's a possibility of any issue, it's done. As far as the pipelines, sort of as they run through your neighborhood, we have right-of-way patrols. The length of these lines is constantly monitored. We have air patrols that are our primary way that we monitor, looking for any kind of vegetation changes, cooling of liquids, etc. There's valves, as we alluded to earlier as well, that can be shut off in the control center. Pilots fly these right-of-ways at least once every 2 weeks, some locations more so, to monitor sort of ground conditions. They also look for things like backhoes sitting near the pipeline, just to be aware of possible work that's being done that we're not aware of. Pipeline regulation, we are regulated through the Department of Transportation, Title 49.95, hazardous liquid pipeline, that's us. PHMSA, the Office of Pipeline Safety and Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, is our regulatory body, and we are inspected every year by them. There's lots of on-site inspections at our facilities. They will monitor our operations sort of on an ongoing basis. If there's questions about anything, they especially look at our records. As much as they're worried about the state of things, they very much inspect our records to make sure that every single piece of maintenance that we are required to do is done and documented to a T. In terms of the security of these lines, in general, they are buried 3 to 4 feet below ground, typically made of steel, and they usually will have a cathodic protection system on them that prevents corrosion. Basically, it induces an electrical current, which will corrode material other than the pipeline in case of water. It's also a way that we test to make sure that the condition of the lines is intact. But just a warning on the depth of those lines. Sometimes they are much deeper, sometimes they are much shallower. We have lines that are less than a foot deep in certain places, which are all issues that we try to address. But they are not always as deep as you might think they are. Lines were put in, say, 60 years ago. Erosion, farm fields tend to have soil changes over the years, so that's always a factor to keep in mind. In terms of integrity, we are required to inspect our pipelines, and we would do so even if we weren't. But the device that we use is called a SmartPig. It is a highly technical instrument that is run through these pipelines, and it has sensors that detect any kind of changes in the surface of the pipeline. Nicks, dents, scrapes, corrosion, that type of thing. These are done at least once every 5 years. Basically, this just flows in line in that series of products you just saw, and then this will be in there, and it will take tons of data about the condition of that line. Here's kind of what one looks like being put into a pipeline. That's probably, I would say, 20-inch diameter, something along those lines. And it has magnetic sensors all around it that are used to examine the inside of that pipeline for any anomalies. Those are odometer wheels on the bottom of it that let us figure out exactly where in that pipeline it is, so that afterwards we come back and say, something here didn't look quite right. We can find exactly where that location is on the ground, and every year we have tons of these where slight things like this trigger a duty on us to go out in the field, dig it up, inspect it, investigate what might have caused what we saw in the data, and repair anything that is questionable. Just a little bit about what we do in terms of communicating with the community. There's 4 key groups that we communicate with. The public, forums like this, emergency officials for things like emergency response, planning with them, going through drills, just to be prepared. Local public officials, we work with them in terms of planning projects. Frequently, and one of the things I get involved in is developers who are building things near our pipelines. Sometimes we need to be working with development or working with municipalities to help development stay clear of hazardous liquid pipelines because they don't always go hand in hand. And excavators, of course, because any kind of construction near these lines is one of the biggest risk factors for an incident happening. And just basically the messages that we would communicate with all of those people: how to recognize a leak, the one-call number to call before you dig, what pipeline markers look like, how to communicate with our company, things that you can and can't do within the pipeline right-of-way, things to look for in case of a release. Generally, you'll see a white cloud coming up from the ground, or you'll see vegetation dying. You'll hear possibly a hissing or roaring noise. And as I mentioned earlier, you'll smell that typical gasoline odor. If ever you would suspect a leak, you need to turn off any equipment, things that could trigger a spark, basically. You want to avoid. Leave the area, stay upwind, call 911, and if you have our number, call us as well. Do not any type of electrical spark. Starting vehicles is a big one. If there is a vapor cloud, unlike natural gas, we are a liquid product, but there still can be a vapor cloud where there's a leak, and that does have a flammable quality to it. Don't ring doorbells. Those cause sparks as well, or could. Basically, just get out of the area and get in touch with the right people. Don't try to fix it yourself. Quick overview around pipeline markers. These are what you see in the field. These are probably the best way that any of you know if there's a pipeline nearby. These will be at road crossings. The guy here with number 4 on it, that's an aerial marker. You'll see those sometimes in open areas. The aerial pilots use those to see where our lines are. And they will always have the name of who operates the pipeline, what's in the product, and an emergency number. They don't tell you the exact location, so they're not perfect, and they don't tell you the depth. This is just a reminder that these things are not always in straight lines. So if there's a marker over there and a marker over there, it doesn't mean connect the dots necessarily. That's kind of what our right-of-way looks like, or we would like it to on a given day. We try to keep them clear so that any issues can be spotted and that we have quick access. And that is our website, which has lots of additional information for anyone who desires it. Information for projects we're doing, public resources, etc. And as was earlier mentioned, pipelines are the safest way to get these products from point A to point B around our country. We fuel the nation's infrastructure. We just try to do it the best way possible. Always call before you dig. There's my contact information as well. I had some business cards out front. If they run out, I will put more out there. I have more with me. That's it. You can't see the emergency number, sorry. Thank you.
Our next speakers are from Spectra Energy. And we're fortunate in that we have a team tonight. We have 2 gentlemen who are going to share the presenting time. The first gentleman is Ryan Lombardas, and he's the area manager in Eagle, Pennsylvania. And in that role, he manages the operations of Spectra Energy's transmissions Eagle area. Prior to becoming the area manager in June of 2012, he served as the area supervisor for the Granville, Pennsylvania and Shermansdale, Pennsylvania operations. Ryan started his career with Spectra Energy, working various positions in pipeline operations in New Jersey. He brings a Bachelor of Arts in Political Science from Dickinson, and he serves on Spectra Energy Northeast Region Environmental Health and Safety Committee, as well as the Spectra Energy U.S. Operations Training Advisory Committee. The other gentleman this evening from Spectra Energy is Arthur Distel, and Arthur is manager of the stakeholder outreach for Spectra Energy. And in that role, he manages public and community outreach related to the company's United States National Natural Gas projects, as well as engaging communities, such as this one right here tonight, to ensure confidence in safety and reliability. He has served as the lead rate and certificate analyst at Spectra Energy, and he's been responsible for both rate and certificate issues for all of the company's U.S. pipelines. He earned a Bachelor of Business Administration in Finance from Texas State University, and he is a member of the Interstate Natural Gas Association of the American Foundation, the International Association of Public Participation, Common Ground Alliance, Young Professional in Energy, and Junior Achievement. So we're very fortunate to have Arthur and Ryan with us this evening, and we will let them figure out how they're going to share this presentation.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. First, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for inviting us here this evening, and specifically Julianne for reaching out to us and allowing us to come and speak to you fine folks. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan to kick off the presentation.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and like Roger said, thanks for joining us. Hopefully we can provide some information for you this evening that will be beneficial. If you have any questions. This is an overview of Spectra Energy. Spectra Energy Corporation. Our facilities basically all throughout North America. We have facilities that run from Houston, Texas, up through in the Nova Scotia, Canada, and that's our natural gas system. We also operate in Western Canada and also in Central Canada, Ontario. So basically, Spectra Energy, an overview, is we're a natural gas transmission company. We own, operate, and maintain about 22,000 miles of natural gas transmission pipelines throughout the U.S. and Canada. We, again, transport natural gas from the supply to the market. So basically, kind of as Beth said, we're kind of like a FedEx, kind of like a UPS. We don't own the gas, we just own the pipelines, and we operate the pipelines, and we transport to the local distribution companies such as PECO, UGI, things like that. In Pennsylvania, we're known as Texas Eastern Transmission. Some people may know us as Texas Eastern Transmission. We've been in Pennsylvania. The company was started in 1947. The pipelines were actually part of the War Emergency Program in the early 40s to get oil from the Gulf of Mexico and Texas up to New York. So Texas Eastern purchased those pipelines from the government in 1947 and turned them over to natural gas. So our one pipeline system is our CRP system that runs through the southern part of Pennsylvania. That's two pipelines. One's a 20-inch high-pressure natural gas, and the other one's a 36-inch high-pressure gas line. Our Penn Jersey system, that's kind of what's up in this part of Bucks County. It's a 3- and 4-line system. The lines range anywhere from 24-inch to 36-inch, and they operate at 1,050 psi. And as you can see there, we have over 2,000 miles of pipelines just in Pennsylvania. So this didn't become too clear, but this is the eastern Pennsylvania. That's Bucks County, right about in there. That's about where we go. This back here is Harrisburg, so this is the Eagle area. We basically started at the Susquehanna River, a little west of the Susquehanna River, and then my area of responsibility is to the Delaware River. So these are our pipeline system. This is the CRP system. This is the system that was put in the early 1940s. This system here is our Penn Jersey system, and that was put in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, and actually the 80s, and there's actually still pipelines being installed. These are lateral lines that we have. This line here feeds into Chester, Pennsylvania, and South Philadelphia. And some of our customers down there will be PECO, PGW. And this system here is called our Skip-Ack system. And that actually runs down, mainly down Route 73, from Skip-Ack, Pennsylvania, right to Levitt Street in Northeast Philadelphia. And this is a little bit a blown-up map of Bucks County, kind of where our facilities are. If I'm not mistaken, where we are tonight, we're somewhere up here. So we're roughly probably 10 to 15 miles south. Our Penn Jersey system runs about 10 to 15 miles south of this area. So as you can see, our pipelines meet here in Lambertville, New Jersey. This system ends, and then we have two other systems that continue north and continue east.
We actually don't have any new expansion projects slated in Bucks County currently, but I quickly would like to talk to you all about the permitting process that Spectra Energy undertakes when we're looking at building new projects. I actually am from Houston. I know I don't have the Texas accent, but I actually traveled up today for this meeting. But Ryan and Pete, they both live around here. I'm going to brag on Ryan just a little bit. He's modest, but Ryan's the third generation pipeline of Texas Eastern. His father and grandfather, I'm sorry, that's okay, we're calling you out, but his father and grandfather also worked for the company. So when we talk about layers of safety, we really mean it. We live and raise families in these communities. So safety is really important to us. So I don't have FERC up here, but the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission is actually our regulating body. We actually, for most projects, we participate in FERC's pre-filing process. For those of you that aren't familiar, that's a voluntary process to get the community and elected officials and basically all stakeholders involved in the permitting. So when we're looking at new projects, just getting into the design phase, we don't route pipelines overnight. It's actually a long process, months, even years sometimes. And for us, it's important to safely route the pipeline, so that we can manage our environmental footprint, and we like to work with stakeholders to make sure that we can address any issues that folks might have. Beyond routing, when we're actually looking at actually purchasing pipe to install, we actually use high-strength alloy steel. We actually go out to the factory, and we have our own inspectors on site. The manufacturers have their own rigorous standards, but we actually send our folks out to oversee the pipe as it's being rolled. That pipe as it's rolled is actually, they actually weld longitudinal seams, and that pipe, those seams are actually ultrasonically, or if you will, X-ray tested. So before that pipe even makes it out to the field, they're testing every one of the welds to make sure that they meet our strict standards, and if there's any issues, that pipe never makes it to us. Once that pipe actually makes it out to the field and we get to the construction phase, we actually, our welders are out in the field are all tested before they're allowed to work for us. We make sure that they know what they're doing, and beyond that, when they're welding, we actually X-ray and inspect all of the welds out in the field before we actually place that pipe into the ground. Beyond that, before we place the pipe into the ground, we also, and kind of broken record here because Beth touched on a little bit of this, but we actually place a protective coating on the pipeline before it goes in, and then we also install cathodic protection, which Ryan will get into and explain cathodic protection later in our presentation. Once the pipe is actually lowered into the trench, which our pipes are a little different than product lines. Our pipes are buried at a minimum depth of 3 feet. So from the top of the pipeline to the surface, there's 3 feet of coverage, and that's the minimum depth. That can vary from, it actually, pipes can be quite a lot deeper than that, depending on circumstances in the area. But once the pipe is in the ground, we actually test that pipe. We hydrostatically test. So we fill the pipeline with water, and we bring it up to about 1.5 times the pressure that the pipeline will operate at. And the pipe has to maintain that pressure for a period anywhere between 8 and about 24 hours. So if there are any issues, I mean, there's a lot of pressure there, we'll identify those issues before we place the pipeline into service. Once the pipeline does go in service and we're operating the pipeline, similar to Buckeye, we monitor the pipeline from our gas control center using the SCADA system. The pipe is monitored 24 hours a day, 365 days a week. If there are any changes in pressure, whether there's a spike or a drop in pressure, we have remote control valves along our entire system that with the push of a button we can close in the pipe, and we actually have folks like Brian and Pete that can go out and inspect the issue and figure out what's going on. Beyond that, we also, similar to Buckeye, our right-of-way needs to stay cleared. When I say it needs to stay cleared, you're not allowed. We don't allow houses or similar to what I said. No barns on top of our right-of-way. You can still farm on top of the right-of-way. You can still, for the most part, grow crops, that kind of thing. But we need to be able to inspect the right-of-way, whether from the air or Brian and Pete actually going out and taking a look. We need to make sure that there's nothing happening on the right-of-way that shouldn't be going on. And that kind of dovetails into the 811 call before you dig system, which we have a presentation coming up later to cover that, so I won't get into it in detail. But as part of our own internal public awareness program, we work with first responders on a regular basis to make sure that they know our presence in the area, that they're ready, that they're trained should anything come up. And beyond that, we also, anyone who lives near our pipeline receives mailers on a regular basis. So it's important that people actually, I know that we all get a lot of junk mail, but it's important if you see anything from a pipeline that has called before you dig on it, hold on to it, because there's important phone numbers on there. And, landowners and stakeholders, there are eyes and ears out there beyond us inspecting it ourselves. It's important that if you see something that you're concerned about, that you call us and let us know, because that's our opportunity to get out there and take a look. With that, I think I'm going to turn it back over to Ryan.
So, I want to talk a little bit about safety before we put the pipeline in the ground. I'm going to touch a little bit on PHMSA. I'm going to touch a little bit on how PHMSA and how they regulate Buckeye. They regulate us as well. So basically, anything that we do, our procedures, we basically make our procedures and we follow the code that PHMSA puts out. And PHMSA is the Pipeline Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, also the USDOT. With PHMSA, they'll conduct regular inspections. We usually have at least one, but usually it's multiple inspections throughout our company, throughout a given year. A lot of times they'll do a large record review. They'll do that in our Houston office, and then they'll send inspectors out, and they'll come out into the areas, and they'll do another thorough record review in the area. They would come to an office like you, like is the area office where I work out of, and I'll sit with the PHMSA inspector for upwards of a week or two. We'll go through records. We take facility tours. They'll tour. They can look at basically anything that we have. They'll look at right-of-way. They'll look to make sure we have pipeline markers that are visible. They'll inspect our standard operating procedures to make sure we're doing what we say we're doing and we're documenting everything. So PHMSA is very, very involved in our operation. And PHMSA would also come out if there was any kind of incident or accident. PHMSA would be involved in that as well. They enforce regulations. That'll be if there's an incident or an accident, they could enforce a violation upon us, or any company for that matter. If we have if we're not living up to our standard operating procedures, PHMSA is able to, they can apply a fine how they feel necessary if we are not living up to what we say we're going to do. And the PHMSA website there, anything that PHMSA does, if they find a company, it's public record. So you can go on to PHMSA's website and they actually list everything, actually all the way back to the 1980s, and I believe even farther, but it's all public record. So if you ever want to take a look and you can kind of see you can see where the pipelines are in your area with the mapping tool, and you can also see what what they're doing in the area as well with pipeline companies. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about pipeline integrity. Beth touched on this a little bit too, so it's going to be some of the same material, but we have three major components to our pipeline integrity. We have inline tool inspections. That would be a smart pig. You saw a picture before. Here's a picture of a smart pig. What that does, Beth explained it, so I won't go through it in detail again, but it's going through the pipeline, it's checking for any corrosion, any indications in the pipeline. If there's anything there, we'll go inspect it. Our pigs can be run 3 different ways. They are run with natural gas, we can run them with nitrogen, and we also have certain facilities that we do a wireline pull. So basically, we set up a big truck and air compressor on one side, we hook a wire to the pig, and then they pull it over to the other side. A lot of times we'll do that with certain crossings at rivers or so most of our lines are run with natural gas. We also have a direct assessment program. Not all of our lines underground are pig. We have certain valve sites, meter stations that have smaller pipe that cross over between the lines. It might be anywhere from 6-inch to 10-inch, 12-inch. That main line that a pig can't run through, a smart tool can't get data. So what we actually do is we will go up and dig these sites up, and we'll visually inspect and put our hands on the pipe, and we will remove the coating, inspect the pipe, and then we'll recoat it back to the pipe. So for lines that are not piggable, that's how we take care of that. As far as our cathodic protection goes, we touched on that a little bit. We're checking the pipe, we're protecting the pipe from corrosion, protecting the steel from corrosion. So we also do above ground surveys where we can actually check the coating on the pipe by the certain surveys that we do. And then from that data, we'll actually go out and make any repairs if we have to. We'll also add other cathodic protection if that's necessary as well. So.
No, we actually, our presentation's a little shorter than best. We thought the Q&A was part of our 15 minutes, so we'll stick around and answer any questions anyone might have in the presentation. Thank you.
So I guess we have 10 minutes.
Our next speaker this evening is Faith Zerman. And Faith is a member of the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and she's been part of that since 1999. Prior to that, she spent a number of years as an assistant staff scientist with a private environmental consulting firm performing natural resource damage assessments related to oil spills. She assisted with the development and planning of habitat enhancements and restoration projects to compensate for natural resource impacts and helped assess environmental impacts from oil spills. Faith directs the Delaware Riverkeeper Network's monitoring program, and she's responsible for water quality data analysis, monitoring study designs to bolster the Riverkeeper's science, advocacy, and legal work, and recruiting, training, and maintaining a strong citizen volunteer monitor team throughout the basin. Faith has a Bachelor's of Science in Biology from Ursinus College, so she's local all the way. So welcome, Faith, please.
I work with Delaware Riverkeeper Network. I've been there for 15 years, and what I thought I'd do today, the presentations have been really great so far, but I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the environmental impacts of pipeline projects, specifically where Delaware Riverkeeper Network has been involved recently, which is more on the larger intrastate pipelines, which a lot of the folks who showed slides, they are the larger transmission lines going through the Delaware River Basin. The reason we're doing that here in the Delaware River watershed, most of you are from Bucks County, of course, and in the Delaware River Basin, there's currently no natural gas drilling or Marcellus shale drilling in the Delaware River Basin. We have a moratorium that was put in place by the Delaware River Basin Commission because of special protection waters, and really because of a lot of fine folks that I see here in the audience who went to public meetings, talked about the issues with natural gas drilling, and really talked to the DRBC about putting that moratorium in place for the Delaware River watershed, which is drinking water for 17 million people. This is beautiful. This is our galaxy, which the Delaware River watershed is a part of. So Delaware Riverkeeper Network, we have a staff of about 15 to 20 people. We have a legal component. We have a couple attorneys on staff that have been beefed up in the last few years, which is great to have that litigation expertise. For any of you involved with Act 13, Nockamixon Township, which I believe we're in right now, we successfully challenged Act 13 at the state level with Nockamixon Township and some of the other municipalities that were concerned about the stripping of municipal rights. So we were involved with that. And I'll put a plug in as they're looking for my presentation with the webinar. There is a Act 13 forum webinar that's on our website right now, which if folks couldn't make it to WHYY last week, we brought all of the attorneys together who worked on that case, and they talk about the legal aspects of challenging Act 13. So it's very good, and it's online, and it's on our website, on our Facebook page, if you want to kind of catch up with that. It's about an hour and a half. And again, as I talk about this, we've really only had experience with one major construction of a large gas pipeline so far. So as you see photos, they're going to be mostly from that specific pipeline that was up in the upper part of the basin. And Roberta did a very good job talking about natural gas drilling, of course, because we do have a moratorium. We don't see these types of pad sites throughout the region. It is important for me to mention, too, at Delaware Riverkeeper Network, part of our position is that we oppose natural gas drilling. And shale gas drilling, we don't believe it's comparable to a sustainable future. So it's important that you all realize that you see that, with our lens. So this is a map. This is available as a DEP map, and it shows the permits of gas drilling in Pennsylvania. And this is a little bit older map. It's hard to see, but from January to December 2011, again, because we're talking about environmental impacts, it's important we think of cumulative environmental impacts, right? Because environmentally, we have to look at things holistically. So in Pennsylvania in 2011, there were 5,728 drilling permits issued. That works out to be 23 permits a day for gas drilling sites. And 2,907 wells were drilled that year. During that time, the state agency, the DEP, the Department of Environmental Protection, detected 4,382 violations during their inspections. So again, these are just numbers that come from the Department of Environmental Protection. And because Pennsylvania has more stream miles than any other state, we have over 83,000 stream miles, as linear pipeline projects get cut across the basin, whether they be the gathering lines or whether they be the large interstate lines, there's a lot of wetlands and water bodies that get cut through and have to be crossed in some manner. So we have a lot of concerns at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network that it's done in a way that limits the harm as much as possible. This is again the Delaware River Basin, again over 13,000 square miles. Here's Trenton, here's Philadelphia. The headwaters start up in Hancock, New York, and again, we're drinking water supply for over 17 million people, which is why we really care about how pipelines and gas drilling commences or does not commence if it were in the Delaware River Basin. Part of 4 states. You can't see this very well, but the reason the Delaware River Basin Commission and others were concerned about drilling is because there's basically a line right here, and all of this area of the watershed has Marcellus shale underneath it, right? And even where we are here in Nockamixon Township, I believe it's Lockatong Formation as well. A lot of the drillers will go underneath. They're going into Utica. They're going into other shale layers as they look at this unconventional way of drilling. So there's a lot of places that could have drilling eventually. But because of this, as biologists, as people working on watersheds, if we don't protect our headwaters, if we don't protect our forests, we're not going to have water to drink. So again, we had a very big concern with gas drilling and how how it would proceed if it would proceed. So we have this map online because what we always struggle with at Riverkeeper is trying to figure out where all the pipelines are. There's a lot, right? And Roberta and some of the other representatives showed some lines of pipelines, but we can never really see a very good map of where things are specifically. But what this map shows is essentially there are about a dozen or over a dozen large interstate transmission lines, either proposed or have already cut through the Delaware River Basin just since shale drilling began, the unconventional shale drilling began. So again, there's a lot of concerns, and because they are so large and so vast, it's hard to get your head around these projects. I don't live in the drilling territory. Some of you are from the drilling territories. You're dealing with gathering lines and much more infrastructure than what we are dealing with here in the Delaware River Basin, but it seems even overwhelming for just the interstate lines. And that's just our perspective with all the lines coming in or proposed, and really just trying to keep track of them and keep up with them and commenting when we can. The other thing I wanted to point out with here too, am I really loud and yelling at you? Okay. The one thing I wanted to point out is segmentation, which is something that the pipeline companies do very well. Essentially, you can see it right here a little bit better than other places. Pipeline companies will come in and essentially do segments, right? Maybe 9-10 miles of a pipeline segment at a time. Here you'll see red, then yellow, then red, then yellow, then red, then yellow. One of the reasons they do that is to avoid better environmental regulations through NEPA. It's a law that essentially says you've got to look at cumulative impact when you look at pipelines. So, you're not just putting in a 5-mile little stretch, you're actually, over time, going to be putting in, a 45-mile or a larger mile pipeline, right? So we at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network are involved with litigation to essentially say pipelines shouldn't segment their projects. They should have to look at cumulative impact over the entire extent of the project. Whether they're doing one segment in 2010, then coming back and doing another segment in 2011, we have to open our lenses and look at the overall cumulative impact, which is what scientists tend to do when they try to think about these things ahead of the game. It's good to kind of know where you're going, where you're planning, and where you're going to be. 20 years from now, we don't want to sit here and think, wow, what were we thinking? Let's look at it holistically from the start. So again, a lot of the pictures that you're going to see are from the Tennessee Gas Northeast Pipeline Project. Also, they had the 300 line, again, that they put in prior to the Northeast Upgrade Project. It was just another segments that they were doing consecutively through the northern part of our watershed. When you look at these pictures, and as we go through, what I would have just mentioned is, in most cases, these are the cleanest streams of our basin that they've cut through. Up in the Poconos, anyone who's been up in the Poconos, we have a lot of high quality and exceptional value streams. Those are the cleanest streams. They're the most diverse streams. They're really pristine and they're really wonderful, and it's why we have very clean water in the Delaware River watershed. So the Tennessee Gas Pipeline began construction in February of 2013 with the tree cutting stage. They were running gas through that segment, specifically in Pike County and in Wayne County, by, I believe, September 2013. So you get a feel that when you have a construction, it's going on quite regularly for many, many hours. It's very loud. People can't get sleep. It can be a little bit nerve-wracking for people who live nearby. But you'll see, too, that some of the areas are pretty remote. Texas Eastern, okay, this is in here. This is the Team 2000 project, which we won't really talk about, but it is coming up. In fact, I think they're starting to cut trees right now for Team 2014. It's a Spectra project, so maybe you guys know. But this is going to drill under the Schuylkill River in Berks County. But I guess to tell you something that you can look at for this is you can track any pipeline through the FERC website. It's a pretty good website. You can get on there. You can get a docket number for each pipeline once it has a docket number, and you can subscribe to that docket and get every type of correspondence that comes through. It's really very handy to get a feel for what's being filed on a specific pipeline project. But again, this pipeline's not in your area. I thought I had taken these out, but I did not. So I'm just going to scroll through here. All right, so here are our volunteer monitors. Again, Delaware Riverkeeper Network, we're a grassroots group. We have a watchdog component. I work with a lot of volunteer monitors. We would not be able to do what we do without having incredible volunteers on the ground. And really, when you're looking at a pipeline project, having landowners that live along the pipeline, it's really important that they're engaged and they're involved, they know what to look for, and they also know what their rights are, and who to call when there's a problem. So again, a lot of the pictures are going to be taken from volunteers who've taken pictures when they're out in the field. This is through High Point State Park, and I apologize, it's not real clear. This is a typical pipe yard, the pipes that are coming in on the trucks. So your typical construction sequence, again, you're going to start with tree cutting and tree clearing. There's trenching, there's blasting, depending on if you have a lot of bedrock. They have to pad the trench bottom, hopefully not with topsoil. There's stringing and bending of the pipe. As you can see here, I believe Tennessee Gas outlines it in 18 different steps. So again, it's a process. It takes a lot of time. As folks talked about, there's the welding, and then they put the protective coating on to weld. And it all takes a lot of time, and it's actually pretty fascinating to watch. So some of the things that we saw, again, just firsthand being out there in the field, we saw a lot of issues, again, with environmental impacts and resources. You see a lot of pipelines moving into public lands and public areas, but what we saw was lack of signage, right? So again, when the pipeline company goes through, they have to have wetlands delineations that are done. You can get wetlands delineation reports on the FERC website through the processing processes. But when you actually go out in the field, what you realize is things really aren't delineated. And even when you're wetland scientists, it's difficult to imagine if you're the person coming through and cutting trees, how do people know where the wetland is? You know, how do they know which trees or where the right-of-way ends? So oftentimes when we were out there on the sites where we had permission to go, it's really hard to understand. And we're right ahead of where they're cutting. So it's just interesting and it really a problem that we saw quite regularly with this pipeline construction project. The other major thing that we see, and again, we'll talk about methane in a little while, but we see a lot of issues again with sediment and erosion, right? So all of the wetlands and streams have to be crossed. This is your typical wetland crossing. They usually put timbers in the water you see here, and that's considered a best management practice because it helps to keep the sediment from getting really compacted. This is the travel lane, and you'll see here is a wetland, I believe, or it might be a stream complex, and they've got the black fabric filter up too. In this case, they do not have black fabric filter underneath. So these are the kinds of things that visually volunteers can be trained to look at these things in the field, to talk about and to report the problems to the agencies. Sediment's really a big issue when you have a linear project with a lot of raw ground, and when you removed the trees and the topsoil, there's a lot of issues with pollution. And I'll explain why that's important in a minute if I get a chance. Again, on the ground, you have places, and people have seen these, right, with developments. Riverkeeper's been doing muddy waters type monitoring for over 2 decades, more with developers than gas pipelines till just recently. But again, if you're going to be putting up, in this case, perimeter fencing, you want to make sure that it's maintained, right? The perimeter fencing is designed to keep sediment from getting out away from the construction corridor, but if you have dilapidated fencing and things that we often documented, it's not really functioning and it's not doing its job. And these are the types of things that you need to report. There are the construction pipeline inspectors who go out, and what we found is working with the FERC regulators, it's really good to have a good dialogue with the FERC regulators, but unfortunately it all comes down to compliance and enforcement, which maybe I'll get into a little bit later. Again, one of the concerns that we often put into the different comments is steep slopes, right? So you'll see some pipeline companies who are used to working in flat areas. They said, wow, we came to Pennsylvania, the geology is completely different, there are steep slopes, this is kind of a whole other animal. And essentially when you take away vegetation from a steep slope and you get a rain event, things just blow out. This is an area of the project where they had to keep trying to reinforce it. This is all sediment, you can't really see it, but this is all brown sediment that came down and then ran into an exceptional value stream. Or actually, this was a C1 stream, it was in New Jersey, near High Point State Park. So again, these are just typical things that companies and developers and anyone who's doing any kind of best management practices has to deal with. And we would see time and time again where it just wasn't working, right? And things were not getting repaired. And I have some stats for that in a minute. So here they are going through a wetland. Again, what's interesting is I really didn't know much about pipelines, but these have a concrete coating on them. My understanding, maybe someone can answer this, but I believe that's to weight it down so that it gets down into the wetland a little bit further to be able to kind of place it in there. And again, this is considered an open trench pit, which I'll talk about in a minute as well. This is the welding that's being done. So when companies go across a stream cut, they can choose to go across it in different ways. What Delaware Riverkeeper Network seems to find as we review these pipeline projects is they usually choose the cheapest method to try to go across. This is where public input is really important, right? And municipal input is really important to say, hey, why not directionally drill under there? Why cause all the problems that you might cause by physically putting a cut through the stream? This is difficult to see, but this is a diagram of basically like a pump method. The pipeline goes across the stream, and the water is kind of pumped through a pipe. And again, the idea there is just to keep running water from being where the construction site is, so you don't have that sediment plume or that sediment pollution. So that's one method to do it. What we found in this project is they built these containments that were supposed to hold the water to do that diversion, to decrease the amount of sediment that would get into these high quality streams. But in most cases, they weren't using them. And partly what was happening here is there's just a lot of flow in these streams going through. And as the flow goes through, if the straw bales aren't high enough, then they'll go over, right? It'll kind of overtop. So what we found in a few instances where we could get access, again, we couldn't see everything all the time, were these actually being bypassed. So it looked good, but it wasn't so good in reality. It looked good on paper. This is horizontal directional drilling. Again, this is the idea of going underneath the stream bed. There are a couple of pipelines planned right now. I know there's one that's going to go under the Brandywine, and I believe they're going to be doing the HDD under the Brandywine, which is usually a better method because you're not disturbing the stream bottom. And this is the beginning of the HDD entry pad. And this is just an example. This is in the Lac of Waxen. This was the 300 line, and you can see here, this was, again, a wet trench, and you can see where the sediment is pooling around in the pipeline, or in the water. So we hope, as environmentally, we hope that they don't do this. We'd rather they go drill under. A couple more photos. I think I only have 3 minutes left. All right. Then I'll end here. This just shows you a cumulative impact for the Northeast Upgrade Project. Kind of shows you, again, the linear nature of the pipeline, how many wetlands you have to pass through. And I don't really have time to get into the public plans, but these are the different cumulative harms associated with pipelines, not to mention explosions. I have a lot more slides, but I believe I'm done for the evening, so thank you for your attention and time.
Our last speaker for the evening, and I'm going to say last but certainly not least, is Greg Krawchuk. And Greg is the liaison representative for the Southeast region for the Pennsylvania One Call system. Now, if you notice through almost every one of the slides, they referenced Pennsylvania One Call. So Greg is here to tell us about Pennsylvania One Call. Based in Delaware County, he's responsible for the education and organization for the One Call system within an 8-county area from Philadelphia through to Berks County and all the way up to Northampton County. He regularly conducts DEP-approved training seminars for underground utility locators and additional programs for facility owners, excavators, project owners, designers, emergency responders, and homeowners throughout the Commonwealth. I have to tell you, I heard somebody from Pennsylvania one call speak at the Northampton County Forum, and I went home all excited, and I said to my husband, I heard about the most interesting organization, and I gave him the name, and he said, well, of course, don't you know about that? Everybody should know about that. And I said, I didn't. So I welcome Greg, and if you don't know about it, he's going to tell you about it.
Wow, what an introduction, huh? Jeez, I can get advertisements from everybody else in their other presentations. I get a build-up like that. If I don't do something right here, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble, I can tell that. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. I thank the League of Women Voters for inviting me here tonight. And I'm going to give you a quick rundown of what Pennsylvania One Call is all about. There's a lot of confusions initially as far as how we work and what we do. First of all, what we are is we are the call before you dig people. Okay? Everybody in Pennsylvania is required, if they're going to disturb the earth through the use of powered equipment, they must first notify the Pennsylvania One Call system. Then what we do is we notify all of the registered underground facility owners within that particular area. They look at the notification, see if they have anything in that area. If they do, they have to go out there and mark those lines. You've all seen the paint on the ground flags maybe here and there. They let us know what they did. We tell the excavator, and that's pretty much where our responsibility ends. Okay? We are not a government organization. We're a private, non-profit corporation. We do not mark out the lines. We don't know where they are either. That's the responsibility of the facility owners. We are not responsible for any enforcement. That at this point is the Bureau of Labor and Industry out of Harrisburg. Really, we're responsible for nothing more than communication, education, and outreach. That's what we do. And we get around and we try and do as much of it as we possibly can. We have been in business since 1972. The law didn't even go into effect until 1974. We were one of the first 3 one-call centers in the country. Okay, we started it all going back in 72. When we first started out, we had 4 registered underground facility owners within Western Pennsylvania. Now we have over 3,500 statewide that are registered with us. Now I know a lot of people think like 3,500 underground. What is there? There's gas, water, sewer, telephone, cable TV. Yeah. Well, the way the law is written, anybody who owns or operates an underground line that provides a product or service to 1 or more customers or consumers is required to be a member of One Call and mark out their lines and respond to notifications. So think about that for a minute. You got a shopping mall. Out in the parking lot, they have an Applebee's over here, they have a tuxedo place here, a gas station. In a lot of cases, they're supplying water and sewer to those businesses. They have lights in the parking lot. They're providing a service. They're required to be members of One Call and mark out their lines. Colleges, universities, private communities, okay, condo complexes, gated communities, manufactured housing communities, things like that. They have water, sewer, sprinkler systems, streetlights. They're required to be members and mark out those lines. Okay, it goes down that far. And that's the type of thing that we get involved in. And we are serving so many excavators right now. Last year we took over 700,000 notifications in Pennsylvania. Okay? On average, each one of those notifications turns into 8 to 10 facility owner notifications. You do the math, that's millions of these markouts that are going on out there that need to be done every single day. So there's a lot going on there. So if anybody, like I said, that owns or operates an underground line is required to be a member. If they don't and their line gets damaged, they're responsible for 100% of any of the costs involved in damage to that line. Now, the law says that anybody that plans to disturb the earth through the use of power equipment needs to notify the one-call center. Okay? It does not say companies. It doesn't say professional equipment operators. It doesn't say utilities. It says anyone. That includes homeowners. For homeowners, the service is 100% free. It does not cost you a penny. So, if you're getting ready to put up a fence or a deck or something, you go to Home Depot on a Saturday morning and rent yourself an auger, you better have notified us at least 3 business days in advance, so you can be protected. Or, there was a guy, I guess it was probably 3 years ago now, in the Wilkes-Barre, Scranton area, needed a mailbox down the end of his driveway. So we went to Home Depot, got himself a mailbox, he rented the auger, never called us, came back, got to his driveway, ripped out the old mailbox, put the auger in the ground, pulled the trigger, and went right through the gas main. Now, he didn't get hurt, but he ended up having to pay for the excavation to find that damage, the pipe to repair the damage, the gas that blew. Guys had the most expensive mailbox in the county. Right? And all he had to do was pick up the phone and dial 811 on Tuesday of that week, and Saturday he would have been ready to go. And it would have been free. 100% would have saved him all that trouble. So remember that. Easiest way to get a hold of us, 811. That's all you need to dial. Doesn't matter if it's a landline, cell phone, anything like that. The computer answers, asks you if you're calling with a DIG notification, say yes. Are you calling for Pennsylvania? Yes. Pennsylvania one call, how may I help you? You know, they'll be on the phone. We're there 24/7, 365. We will always answer the phone. We're one of the few places around where you can call us at 11:59 on New Year's Eve and someone's sober. We'll pick up that phone. Okay. You need to notify us 3 to 10 business days in advance of the project. Okay? So it's business days, that's any day except Saturday, Sunday, or state holiday. So let's say, for example, you call us on a Monday. Never count the day you call. Okay? So Tuesday would be day 1, Wednesday is day 2, Thursday anytime, 12:01 a.m. if you like, you can start your day. So if you want to work on your house on a Saturday, it's a good idea to call us no later than Tuesday, because then Wednesday's the first day, Thursday's the second day, Friday you're allowed to dig, but it's 3 to 10 days. So you got Friday, Saturday, Sunday don't count because you're not business days. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So if it rains out, you're still good for the next weekend. Okay? So let us know that ahead of time. Let us know when you want to dig. This is kind of what I explained in the beginning. As you can see, everybody's been having a little trouble with the images coming out of this projector. So this just recaps what I said, where people call in, we tell the facility owners, they take care of what they need to do. Let us know. We pass the information back to you that way. I want to see something. Yeah. Okay. I'm just checking on my presentation here. They changed things on me and don't know. When you do call in a notification to us, keep in mind there is no such thing as too much information. We need to know exactly where everything is going. Remember, 700,000 notifications, millions of tickets. Just to give you an example, PECO Energy. They have gas and electric in, 5 counties, 6 counties, something like that. 3,000 to 4,000 of these notifications every single day. And most of them have to be marked out in 2 days. Okay, these guys only have so much time to put on each one call. So the more information you can give us on where that work's taking place, where your property is, the more time they can spend finding your lines, the less time they have to spend finding your site. We ask you for the county, the municipality, the street, the address, 2 cross streets. If you have to, give us directions. Say something like, head north on Elmwood Avenue and get to Elmwood National, look on the southwest corner, see a stone house, split rail fence around a big pine tree out in the front yard. Go down the driveway, we're working out in the backyard. Everybody knows where you are. Okay, permanent landmarks, trees, fences, posts. Not that junk car that's been sitting there for 6 months. They may tow it away the day before everybody comes out. Okay? Tell us where you're working on the property. Like I said, go out the driveway, we're in the backyard. We're working out in front, we're planting bushes, we're tearing out trees, grinding stumps, whatever it is. Let us know what it is, where you are exactly. Okay? If you're working in the middle of a field somewhere, you have a lot of property, you want to put something in the middle. You can't tell them, stand at this point, go 2,986.3 feet, 12 degrees north. Nobody does that kind of thing. So what you do then is you mark the site in white. Just put a white circle on the ground, box it in white. You know, just get a white paint from Home Depot. You can get the stuff they mark out ball fields with. You know, just put it out there so when the guy shows up, looks for the white paint, knows right where to go. Okay? Always a good thing to know about. The facility owner will then mark the location of that line within 18 inches horizontally. That's where they're supposed to mark it into. They're supposed to get that close. So they get a little leeway, you get a little leeway, everybody knows what's going on. Okay? And they do mark it in a number of different colors. Now, where does this go? Did this jump? They got rid of half my presentation. All right. How are we doing? Doing good. Okay. I have cards out on the desk out front that have all these colors on them that they use to mark out the different lines. Okay? You'll see white is what you use to mark out where the dig takes place. Pink will always be a survey mark. You've all seen the flags in the ground marking down new excavation and things like that. Red and yellow, they're the big guys. Red's cables, conduit. Yellow is gas, oil, steam, petroleum. They're the ones that when they get hit, it's on Action News. You know, so there's the ones you want to stay clear of. Orange, communication lines. Your cable TV, telephone, fiber optic, the expensive ones. They're the most expensive ones that people damage. You hit one of those main Verizon Fios feeds that goes down into a development down the street, you're going to take out in service for hundreds of people, a lot of whom have their phones going through their internet line now. And if somebody has a heart attack and can't call 911, you know, so you got to watch out for those specifically. Blue, purple, and green are waters. Blue is drinking water, in case you want to remember. Purple, you don't see that much. That's primarily for reclaimed water on a catch basin, slurry lines. You'll see it on fire plugs sometimes in rural areas if they're drafting water out of a pond or a stream or something like that. Green would be any type of sewer, whether it's a storm drain, force main, anything like that. House, building, sewer. While we're talking about water, if you call out for a mark out on your own property, please keep in mind, facility owners are required to mark the lines that they own, regardless of where they're located. In the case of electric, gas, telephone, cable, 9 times out of 10, they own everything right up to your house. As a matter of fact, where I lived down in Delaware County, the people came and put in my gas service, they said we own up to 2 inches coming in the side of your house, and that's it. Water and sewer only own the mains. They don't own the supply lines. And if you've ever lost your water service from public water or sewer, you find out pretty quick who's responsible to pay for that. Okay, so remember that's not going to be marked out if you call for a project. I tell every excavator that I train, so you may see this come up in your place somewhere if you have somebody working there. They'll come up and they say, excuse me, can I go down to the basement and see where your line is coming in? Because you can tell out on the street 9 times out of 10. There'll be a curb stop, there'll be a vent cap or something. And if it comes in the same spot inside, you're pretty sure it's regular street. But if it comes in the back of the house and everything's out front, then you got a bit of a problem there. And you need to address that. Okay? Also, if you're having someone working on your house, they should have placed the one call themselves. Do not let them talk you into doing it for them. A lot of these guys out there, no names, okay, they will tell you, oh, listen, if I pull it, it costs me $125. If you call it, it's free. Okay, if you call it, it's free. That's right, but then you got to do the digging. If he does the digging and hits something, he's 100% responsible. And you know owners, they're going to sue everybody. My apologies to anybody who's here that's the lawyer. Okay, but it's true. We get sued, and all we do is ask for phone. Okay? So if they ask you to do that, say no. You place the one call so you're protected under the law. And that $125 is per year, not per notification. Don't let them put it on your bill. Trust me. Okay? There's a lot of things you can do to keep the community safe. I just gave you a quick rundown. Okay? There's a lot of people out there that dig without placing a one call. Nationally, the number is now down to a little over 30%. In Pennsylvania, we got it down to 17%. 10 years ago, it was at 35%. So we got it down low. People are calling now primarily because of 811. Everybody knows about it. If you see somebody digging And you don't see any marks on the ground. You don't see the red paint, the yellow paint, the green paint, whatever. They're operating equipment right on top of those lines. They're not allowed to do it. The trench looks like it's going to fall in. You got all these guys in there. It's like that. And the dirt's all right on the side. Something. You see any danger to anything, you pick up the phone, you call 911, and you get the cops in there. Right? Local law enforcement and emergency management personnel have full rights and privileges under Pennsylvania law to shut down any job for a violation of this act. Okay, so if you see that going on, you know, this guy, I wish you could see this picture. This picture's great. It's this old guy in there, you know, in the trench, right next to the lines. The equipment is right next to him. The soil is all piled up. That thing is ready to collapse in on him. And it can go like that fast. Okay, there's so much more in that picture. It's frightening as far as that goes. You see there, the backhoe is going in there right next to a yellow flag. That's a gas line. That could be a Buckeye line, it could be a Spectra line, it could be anybody's line. It could be your line that's coming into your house. Hey, there's some exciting things that can happen with anything. You see somebody in a trench like that, you know, it's going to be ugly very fast. It only takes a split second for that trench to collapse. And right now, it's been such a problem that within the course of the past, I want to say 18 months now, OSHA has had a directive to all of their inspectors that if they're driving around and they see any excavation or construction site, they are required to pull over and inspect it. I know a guy that got a $10,000 fine for having a ladder in their long poles. So they're serious about it. Because too many people have been getting hurt. That's what it's supposed to look like. You've seen these big boxes sometimes sitting on the side of the road. They slide right inside the trench to keep it from collapsing in. If they don't bring those in, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll spread it out and, you know, move the dirt to the sides. That way, it can't collapse in as quickly. So there are good ways to do it. You know, that's the best thing you need to think about there. Hey, there's that galaxy again. So, I guess really, the main things that I want you to go home with tonight is, first of all, I want you to grab the information that I got out on that table. I got little brochures there to kind of explain the process. They give you a list of the questions we're going to ask you if you happen to call in for an excavation. Take one of those plastic cards that are out there that have all the colors on there so you're aware of what's going on. You know what the marks mean when they're on the ground. And lastly, I got business cards out there. Okay, it's got my cell phone number on it. Feel free to call me with any questions, problems, or confusions you may have. Don't be shy. I don't just work for excavators and utility companies. I work for everybody in this business. And that includes you, and I'll be happy to help you out any way I possibly can. Answer any questions after this is done, or if something comes up later when you think 2 days from now, I wanted to ask you that, call me. Don't be afraid. Except don't call me tomorrow or Monday, I'm off. Okay, I'm taking a couple days off in the woods, so. But other than that, I'm pretty well done. Again, thank you for your attention. Thanks for coming. If you need anything